What's up, my people? We are about to have a conversation with Jason J. Bell. I believe it's Jason J. Bell, just Jason Bell, I'd imagine. I don't normally check my messages. I don't really check my Instagram messages that often anymore. I'll do it every few weeks. I got tagged on a video the other day, and he was doing a back squat, and he's like, "Hey man, am I functional yet?" And I've had a lot of people who do powerlifting who've done that in the past, and I know they do it as a joke, and so you know what? I'll get into this once he tunes in and once he comes into the podcast, so that way we can clear that up. So yeah, I'm just gonna wait around and see if he shows up. So Jason, if you're around, just go ahead and invite yourself to the show, and I will bring you on if you're around right now. Gotta stay hydrated. I've noticed people are taking your words out of context. Yeah, man, that happens a lot. It's just something you got to learn to make peace with. Yeah, people take what I say out of context. And you know what? What'll be great is that, you know, I'll be given the opportunity to give context, to explain what I say, and to keep this in mind. There's just some times that I'm wrong about things too, but oftentimes people don't really know what I'm talking about. And I'm not afraid to say I don't know. That's one thing I always tell people, like, hey, you know, I just don't know. As if you're going to be a good scientist, at some level, you're going to have to tell people that you just don't know. I'm making sure that I'm going to have to check and see if he's here or not, because he's not popping up here yet. But I'll wait a little bit to see if he tunes in. If not, I may have to close this out. We may have to do round 2 of this, and I'll have him hit us up on this page. I'm really actually looking forward to this. This is like a kind of a long time coming. I wouldn't call it a coming out party, but I feel good, man. I feel good. I feel at peace with a lot of things. Not completely at peace, but I feel like I'm moving in the direction of it, towards that path. I feel good. I'll maybe give it like another 2 or 3 minutes and see if he tunes in. If not, I may have to close this out and see if I can start up another one with him. Yo, Jason, you there, man? Where you at, bro? Who is Jason J. Bell? We'll find out in a minute. We'll see if he tunes in. If not, I may have to... Oh, there he is. All right. I see he just joined the video. 1 second, he'll be on in a second with us. Let's see, is he on?
What's good, man?
What's up, brother? How you doing, man?
Good, buddy. How you doing?
Good. I wanted to just kind of introduce you to the audience, kind of how we, I guess, instituted our dialogue yesterday. First and foremost, Matt, I appreciate you just even coming on and actually taking the time to do this. Can you see me on the screen? Am I okay? Because it looks like my head is being chopped off here.
Your head's a little bit chopped off. I think mine is too, a little bit. I'm trying to adjust it.
Let me adjust it a little bit. I just bought this little tripod yesterday. I hope it doesn't fall down, so we'll see how that pans out. All right, I think I'm good here. All right, so essentially what happened yesterday is, and Jason, I don't mean to take digs at this, but I've had what you did done to me a lot of times, where people say, "Hey, am I functional now?" And it's specifically with either the deadlift or the back squat, one or the other. And so I'm in a different headspace these days, bro. I think in life, like I realized about like in 2013, I was like, I'm about to get into a dogfight, because what I was doing was a bit radical for its time. It was still undeveloped. It's not like FP was like what it is today. I just felt like I wasn't being given enough time like I feel that people should reserve judgment sometimes before all the data is put forth. And I feel like I was chopped down by many industry leaders, people who were PhDs and whatnot, and I didn't think it was fair. I was like, come on, man, like I think I'm on to something here. If I'm helping people with pain and I'm helping them to get better, I think I should be given the benefit of the doubt. And so at around 2013, 2014, I just realized, hey man, I'm about to get into a fight. And I'm about to get into a fight with a lot of people, and that I'm going to have to kind of like occupy this mental space of kind of a madman to some degree, somebody who's like, hey, look, I'm not going to be
anybody that's ever done anything that's different always has. So
yeah, bro. And so on my end, it's kind of like I was picked on my whole life. I'm a small guy, and I'm a short guy, and growing up, I was picked on a lot. And I've been known as being the kind of guy who has like a little man complex, but I'm just like, hey, like, I feel like I can contribute to. I feel like I can be helpful to. I don't want to be diminished. Nobody wants to be picked on. And so my natural inclination has always been to fight back. That's been my whole thing. And so I feel like I've been in a war probably like the last, since like around 2014, I've kind of been in a war. Like back in the day, people would, it wasn't favorable, the things that people would say about me. Like back in the day when people were more on Facebook, I would get tagged, or I would get, people would share something from the functional patterns page, and then I would just get torn apart by like the powerlifting community. And back in those times, like T Nation was huge. I got a lot of sense of self-righteousness from the T Nation community, from powerlifters, and they're very different from what they are today. Like I'll say that the powerlifting community,
the industry as a whole is evolving. So
it's completely, and on my end, I'm like, okay, I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow. And the main thing is what I came out with you, which I thought was really cool, man, is I said, okay, let me run a test, because I don't normally respond back to this. And so yesterday was a different day. And so I was like, let me just see what happens. I send you back, and I send you a result, and I said, hey man, what do you like? I was like, hey, this is what functional patterns does. And you gave me props. You're like, bro, that's awesome what you're doing. I'm like, thank you. Game recognizes game. And I thought that was really cool, bro. And I just got to say, like, I believe this is how we get to more common ground. I believe this is how we all intersect towards going down to a better path, to just having a way where we can all coexist with one another in this industry. Like, I realize I got a reputation with many people. That's not who I am. I feel like I had to morph my character and my personality to that of almost like somebody who's crazy. Like, have you ever worked with MMA fighters or anything like that? You ever work with them?
Not to the higher level, but a lot of the more the amateur guys, yeah.
Even the amateur guys, but when you get to the highest level, what you'll find, especially with MMA fighters, is that they have like an immense amount of humility. Like, they're the most chilled back people you'd ever meet in your life. It's surprising.
It's like that with almost any sort of modality that you end up training with. Like the higher end guys usually have the
yeah. Once you get people that are at a higher level, you'll also notice the humility comes along for the ride. And with MMA fighters, it's the same thing. But like, what they do is so brutal. You're thinking, okay, well, these cats are like crazy. But then, like, when I'm like, or I'll be backstage with them, like seeing them prepare for a fight, you can see them psychologically switching something, saying like, this is not who I am, but this is what I got to do. This is going to be my job.
Well, I think that's pretty much the biggest divide between, an athlete, especially a higher level athlete, and like the general public. It's just the hunger and that ability to switch that, like the way that you're viewing the situation you're about to approach, where there's no option anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you have to go all in.
I feel like that's kind of where I've been with what I've become, what I became, and what I am now. I just feel like I had to tune myself to be like, okay, I gotta be a little bit crazy for the next few years so I can earn my respect, and so this company can earn that respect. So that's where I'm kind of coming at it, man. And I appreciate you being so amicable to trying to actually understand where I'm coming from. I also realized you had an altercation with somebody from Functional Patterns, and they were being derogatory towards you. And I apologize for them, because I'm the leader in this, and they're a lot of times people mirror the sentiments that I have in a situation, and I, as somebody who's kind of leading a group of people, have to take ownership for that. So I personally want to apologize for that myself, and I'm hoping that from here forward that your perceptions of myself and my community will be different. But if you can, Jason, just let people know about your background, like what you do currently, like, and really what even brought you to Functional Patterns, what even interested you in Functional Patterns, if anything at all, and just kind of where you're at this point.
Yeah, I just want to backtrack just a little bit, like just the fact that,
Yep.
you know, you have enough respect and humility to be able to just apologize for something that you weren't even necessarily responsible for. Like our conversation the other night completely changed my perspective of you. So much respect to that.
Well,
But yeah,
it's a two-way street, bro. It's a two-way street. You came with respect, man, so I got to give it. And never mind that, bro. The sentiments of the industry, they're way different. Things are very different than what they used to be. It used to be a madhouse about 10 years back. But yeah, man, I'm really happy to see where we're going with things. But sorry,
yeah,
go on.
it's all good, man. So basically what brought me to functional patterns in the first place is one of my mentors, Chad Benson. He used to be associated with somebody named Peter Twist, who both are, you know, the upper echelon of the elite coaches in British Columbia, Canada, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And they are huge advocates for, like, you know, understanding the fascial line, spiral line, and making sure that you can move pain-free before you start adding external load. So that's kind of like the origin of where I started within the fitness industry. Now, naturally, I had the gift of strength. Like, you know, before I even knew what progressive overload was, I was already squatting 5 plates at like 16 years old. So
Yeah.
that's what made me kind of approach powerlifting in the first place. So I own a company called Genu Athletics, and essentially right now we have a large variety of coaches, all with specialties in different modalities. So for me, approximately, let's say 5 years ago, when I felt like I was hitting a peak in powerlifting, I had a feeling like that I had potential for more. And I wanted to experience everything before I really created like one sort of set, you know, style of training, for example. And I was having a lot of people approach me for bodybuilding or endurance style training, marathon running, and I didn't feel comfortable training those people without that sort of experience.
Yep.
So
So
I decided
what
to
are the
compete
what are the
in.
goals? What are the so most of the clients that you have usually have like aesthetics goals, strength development goals. Like what kind of
Yeah,
things do
I'll
you
get into that
find
in just
yourself?
a second here, right?
Okay, okay, okay.
But because basically, like the philosophy right now for my company is that we want to basically combine all modalities and give you
Yep,
the best option to pick your own,
yep,
but not limit yourself to basically only having like a tunnel vision mindset. Like even our powerlifters, they obviously still want to look good.
yep.
Even our athletes, they still want to get stronger, right? They still have to eat better, different things like that. So yeah, like after competing in bodybuilding, strongman, Olympic weightlifting, like CrossFit, things like that, and I think that even though I don't personally want to continue competing in CrossFit, it's one of the things that maybe the philosophy that my company has probably relates to the best. Because rather than maybe, you know, being the strongest person in the room, the fittest person in the room, like what does that really mean? The fittest person in the room? Are you now the most mobile? Are you the most stable? Do you have the best endurance? Do you have the best strength? Do you have the best power output? Like, what does that really mean? And when you look at somebody like Matt Fraser, he doesn't necessarily try and win every single event, but he's the best at everything combined. And essentially, that's basically the route that I'm trying to bring my company. It's something that I respect from functional patterns, where you guys are bringing something that's different, and I do believe it works. But I
Yes.
think that something I really wanted to try and clear up today was, and the only reason I think that I had that altercation with one of your members as well back in the day,
Yeah.
was saying very blatant statements, and whether this is just something that's, you know, to just get hype or whatever, or just get attention, but saying something as simple as a pull-up is not a functional movement, or squats are not essential and that you shouldn't do them, right?
Okay, keep going. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you,
So that's kind of where, you know, my bias originally came, because I like to try and be very open-minded, and instead of, you know, saying that you
by the
shouldn't
way,
do something, find
I
the
like
best way to do something.
I like how you're getting right into this. This is really good. So keep
Yeah,
going. This is good.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's just like I said though, instead of like find or saying that you shouldn't do something, if it causes you pain, find the root cause of the issue and then find a way to do it without pain. If you are not
Okay,
good at
now,
something, find a way to do something, right? And I know that's something
yes.
that you guys do embody. It's just the post that essentially that I was reading we're not as open-minded as you were the other day in our conversation.
Well, this is the thing. I've cleared my career is really what has gotten me angry, and what would trigger the anger thing and would get me triggered in the past would be that I would, like, let's say if I tell somebody, hey, if you're doing a barbell back squat, like, this is how I see it. That there's like basics that people understand, and then there's the basics behind the basics behind the basics behind the basics. Like, let's say, for example, if you do a squat, which I think is a functional movement, I just don't give priority because humans, if you look at what all anthropologists agree upon, we are standers, walkers, runners, and throwers as a priority. That's what has made that's what is the human blueprint, essentially. And so when I look at something like a squat, it's definitely a functional movement. We need to do it. Something like a pull-up is functional. I do pull-ups. There's ways of going about it. It's just the qualm that I have goes back to priority, the priorities that we give to certain exercises. But when it comes to a squat and a back squat, I have a different viewpoint, because my whole career is pretty much built upon trying to eliminate dysfunctions on the body. And that's, at some point I had mentioned to you in our conversation that I have a goal, and my goal is to be able to move really well, and even all the way past 100 years old, and that I'd like to live to 150 to 200 years. And some people might think I'm crazy for it. I don't think many people are anymore, because I think that science is kind of revealing that
science is evolving.
Exactly. And so on my end, that's been my objective from day one. So my perspective comes down to that every single decision that I'm going to make to make myself more optimal is more optimal, or damage myself, is going to be imperative. Like, what the choices that I make in my life will determine whether I get to that goal of making it to 150 or 200 and then feeling really good or not. And when I look at something like a barbell back squat, for example, the problem that I have with it is no matter what you do, like, let's say if we're looking at the spine, if I put a little compressive load on the body or on the spine, it's never going to symmetrically take that pressure. In one way, shape, or form, the pressure is either going to go forward and back. The spine's either the upper vertebrae or the vertebrae in the middle are going to shift forward or back. They're going to shift side to side, or they're going to shift side to side, forward or back with a twist. And so even if you just put a little compression on it routinely, that's going to be problematic, in the sense that if your spine, if you're already creating this compression and then you're creating shearing forces and the spine barely moves, that at some point, if you continue to do that, you're going to develop calcium deposits in certain areas. Some parts of the spine are going to end up overly moving. Other parts are not going to move. And if that pattern repeats over and over again, that's going to have consequences lateral to the kinetic chain, like superior to the kinetic chain, and even inferiorly. So
I wouldn't disagree at all, but would you not agree, as if you had found a common ground between, say, functional patterns, corrective exercise, corrective movement, and your goal was to disassociate the risk to the reward, where you can find the right warm-up, like the right preparation to make sure that anytime these issues do arise, you're able to address them properly?
So Jason, this is the problem, bro. It's like, I have intellectual property, and so look, this is my life. On one side, I had people that told me I was crazy, or already assumed that they knew what I was doing. And on the other side, you have plagiarists, and I have people who plagiarize. And I know people who plagiarize get pissed off when I talk about this, and they say, well, you know what, you can't own anything. Well, I'm like, yeah, but if you have your car, nobody steals it from you. It's like, do I have to go into this concept of ownership? In our society, this principle of ownership matters. And so on my end, I have intellectual property, and if I release what I actually do to the public, it's like, I think that people have a lot of perceptions about what I do, and that it's functional movement, or that it's spiral lines or whatever, that we're like, that because of what they see on social media, that's what I do. But there's so many layers, and it's not until somebody actually trains with me in person or trains with me that they're like, wow, this guy's for bodybuilding, because functional patterns is bodybuilding. He's for explosive training. He's for hypertrophy. He's for body fat reduction. I'm for all these things. It's just on the complication always comes back to the specifics, that I don't think people know the depths of how far I'm going until they do it. So let me give you an example. I have a guy named Kyle Jake that I just worked with, that I've been working with for the last 4 years. He's a wrestler.
Yeah,
he just beat a guy named Jordan Burroughs, really good, studly guy. If you look at what his body did about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, prior to wrestling, and then instituting like what I wanted him to do with his body, it's a vastly different person. And very often his coaches would be like, Kyle, you need to move your feet. Kyle, you need to move your feet in wrestling practice. But then I would say, well, how is he going to do that? He happens to be a person that has spinal compressions and his hip sockets have become completely hypermobilized, shoulders have become hypermobilized, and the neck has been hypermobilized. And that's not just because of weightlifting. Although he did lots of weightlifting, I think it's just his genetics. I think his genetics are that of a person who's like naturally flexible. And so what I had to do with this guy to get him to address those problems is unbelievable. It's going to be put forth in a documentary by a man named Greg Osseta. By the end of the documentary, I think people might get a better understanding of how deep I go into what I do. Like, to get somebody who has cerebral palsy, it's to actually move better and my practitioners do this routinely. It takes a fundamental approach that's beyond what people even consider right now. So the issue is, like, what you're saying makes complete sense to me. I just think that the issue therein lies that there are more fundamentals that people aren't looking at, that we can go way deeper, that essentially, instead of me moving my shoulder around,
no, and I can agree with that.
And so the dilemma just comes down to the level of execution that we're talking about with training here, bro. And when I train people, it's not, and keep this in mind too, Jason, FP is not what FP 5-6 years ago was definitely not what it is now. FP, what it is right now, is not what it was 2 months ago.
Well, even the industry as a whole, man, it was, I would say, probably in the past 5 years, has seen like the biggest change in people being a little bit more open-minded to being, multi-sport athletes too, rather than just being like dedicated to only one thing. So 100%, I would agree with that. But with kind of what you're saying, one of the things I just have a question for you in regards to, does it not come down to like level of specificity of what the client wants? Okay, so look, this is, bro, these are perfect. Thank you. This is perfect. Okay, so first let me get into the mechanics of it. Yeah. When people think about correcting the problem in the body, like let's say, and I'll probably use this in a lot of videos I'm going to make in the future so everybody kind of sees it. When I think about like programming better function on the body, I think about things in terms of looking from the perspective of moving parts in ratios to one another. So I think about, like, let's say if somebody's running in space and they're doing this, right? They're moving in space, they're like whoop, whoop, right? They're moving in space. The proportion of motion of my leg kicking back here, if I'm going to operate functionally with my body, needs to be proportional to the motion of this leg moving forward in space if I'm going to run correctly. If this leg kicks back too much and this leg doesn't kick forward enough, I'm going to have really tight hamstrings, tight glutes, whatever, tight erector spinae at the lumbar region. If this leg kicks too forward and this leg doesn't kick back far enough, then that means I'm going to have tight hip flexors, tight quads, whatever inside. So the key point is balancing out, proportioning out the motions correctly, and that there's a level of specificity in training that needs to be accounted for when it relates to that. So speaking in terms of specificity, what I look at is trying to correct the gait cycle and doing whatever I can to specifically reassociate tensions the right way, but then get the ratios of moving parts the way that they're supposed to. Sometimes they want it at a 1-to-1 ratio, 1-to-2, 2-to-1 ratio. It depends on the joint that I'm talking about. But as it relates to, so that's what I mean by specificity and biomechanics, that if we're correct, there's no mobility drill that accounts for that because they don't account for the ratios. Like the amount of humeral motion in space is not necessarily, there's not a great concern about how much the humerus is moving in relation to the trunk, that the humerus is probably moving way too much and the trunk isn't moving enough, or that my hips are moving too much and my femurs are moving too little. It's like people don't think in terms of different parts of the body moving in relation to one another, and they don't try and look at the ratios between the moving parts. So for me, what I try and do, whether it's wrestling, football, even weightlifting, I can look at the ratios between moving parts and find more efficiency by just dispersing them. Sometimes it'll be a 1-to-100 ratio that needs to happen in terms of moving parts in the body. So like one thing will move a lot, and then another thing will just barely move just to lever that over, right? Like a long lever would have that in motion. So keep this in mind. So that from a perspective of correcting dysfunctions on the body, that's how I see it, is balancing out ratios. As it relates to clients, because you're talking about goals, right? Like what the person's goals are, correct? Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. So let me get into that. My perspective as it relates to a person's goals is kind of like if Do people ever make the option to get cancer or not? Like if you gave somebody the option to choose to get cancer or not, then nobody would choose to get cancer.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hurt themselves intentionally. So for me, I try looking at the human organism not from the perspective that they have free will. I'm a determinist. I believe that that we kind of are being funneled down a path, and that the human organism has a path that it needs to respect. And that the more that we respect that path, the more that we respect that path, the greater the reward we get with our physical body. So sometimes our biases could be self-destructive. And sometimes you need an individual there to tell you, hey man, that bias may not actually be serving you. Yeah, it may make you feel good. Yeah, maybe working out that way may trigger your dopamine and it may create a great endorphin rush. But what about all the cortisol that you can't secrete out of your system after you get done working out? What about all the joint compression that you induce on your body that's going to keep you in a flatline cortisol state all day long? Like there's consequences for the choices that we make. And if you want to attain good function and live a really long time and be able to run fast, jump high, throw far, punch really hard, kick really hard, then there's these physical principles that we need to like take in mind. And the fact that we don't get to choose whether we're humans or not, that's a given. And we can't, I feel personally that we can't disrespect that. And if we do, then we end up in lots and lots of pain and we're going to get injured. So for me, as it relates to a client's goal, I believe if we're going to be really scientific, we got to put people's biases aside, because we have to take into consideration, where do we get the influence to want to do the things that we do? Like me personally, I got into the martial arts because of Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like that for me, I was like, man, I love Jean-Claude Van Damme. I love Sylvester Stallone. And then at the same time, I watched like boxing when I was a kid. And I was very much into that. Fortunately for me, the ratios of movement that are involved in boxing relate greatly to human biomechanics substantially. Like the translation is incredible. And so on my end, I got lucky in that from that standpoint. But if somebody says, hey, look, I want to be like a contortionist, or if I want to do powerlifting, and I'm not saying this to take a dig, but I prompt the question, why does a person want to go down that path? Is it because they're trying to make a healthy decision, or are they aiming to compete in something just because they feel like they need to get it out of their system? So this goes back.
Well, I think it's just, obviously it could be a self-confidence thing, and especially like in a year like COVID, right, where I think a lot of people are dealing with mental health issues. Yeah, we're all vain to some extent. Right?
Yes.
And sexual selection is real. So you being able to train a way that makes you feel good, whether it's maybe not even the best thing for you ultimately in, like, say, a longevity perspective.
Yes.
It still doesn't mean it's not good for you, right? So that's where, again, my only bias would necessarily be with the conversation that we're, like, the entire topic that I think that we're trying, or maybe stirring away from a little bit, is... Yes. How do you find that common ground between finding that proper preparation, making sure that you're doing the right assessments, taking the right precautions, making the right modifications to your style of training of your choice without becoming limited in the exercise selection or the modality that you choose to basically specify it? Okay, so let me give you a hypothetical, Jason. Yeah. And you tell me. So let's say we go back 130, 140 years, and then the Wright brothers say, hey, man, I want to make a flying machine. You might think that those guys are crazy at that point. Be like, a flying machine? That nobody's ever flown before. That might be crazy. And so what I feel like is that there's going to be, so like you see my nose, it's been broken like 2-3 times, partially because of boxing, partially because my brother smashed my face into a door when I was like 12 years old. It's a mess. And so my face is always symmetrical. But what if at some point in the next 10 years, I made my face perfectly symmetrical, my mandible got bigger, my cranium got bigger, I got more muscles on my face, more muscles on my traps, I put on like another 15 pounds of pure mass that's supporting my musculoskeletal system. What if I got to a place like that? And then I could like literally jump off my roof, do a backflip. I could run whatever, a 4.540 when my fastest time before would be like when I was in high school would be like a 640 yard dash. I'm sure it's a lot faster now because I was a late bloomer. But what if I could get to that point? So I feel like where I'm at right now is I have to sweeten the pot for people to say, well, do I give in to how I want to train so then I can become superhuman or not? And that's where I feel misunderstood, because I feel like what I want to do
Because anytime that you hear about people say, hey, look, I want to be superhuman, they'll be like, hey, look, I'm going to go run an ultra marathon. Or look, I'm going to go in cold water for 30, 40 minutes. It's always like something that relates to endurance, but it's never about mechanical potential. Where I'm like, hey, look, like I can actually create so much mechanical potential with my body and not get hurt that it's like essentially we'd be walking around not with I guess almost superhumans, because if you look at somebody like Barry Sanders, who's like who's like the prototype of mover that I always go back to when it comes to like seeing as the example of what I would want the average Joe to be. But let me put it this way. Imagine that I get a person that does have cerebral palsy, and then I have them sprinting a 100-meter dash in, let's say, like 13 or 14 seconds. Let's say it doesn't have to be super fast, but let's say I got somebody who had a really, really huge problems with their body, and I got them to overcome completely overcome. Imagine that I took myself to a physicality that's beyond belief, like beyond belief. I believe that if I do that over the next 5, 10 years, that I don't think there would be a conversation with that. Like, I don't think people would argue whether a horse and carriage is the right way to navigate space in comparison to that of an automobile. Like, everybody drives cars. I don't see people riding horses anymore, right? And so for me, what I see this as more than anything is a technological development and technological innovation. That's what I see functional patterns as. And so as I see it right now, I'm thinking about it more from the standpoint of that I'm instituting a new technology that's going to alter humans to such a degree that people are going to look at what we do and say, wow, there's no choice here anymore. It's so good that we have to go down that path, because you wouldn't want to go back to what it was before. I'm in that transition right now, essentially. That's where I'm coming from. And I'm not saying I have the answers yet, but I do feel that because, like, as eukaryotes, which is what we are in biology, we're part of the eukaryotic kingdom. We have a cell wall that's soft, and we have a cytoskeleton that can be moldable, meaning that we can change the shape of our cells substantially. Like, we have a great say in how we look and how we function. And that's the reason that we see so much variability from plants to animals, from the different types of animals that exist. And that really relates to the scaffolding that exists in every single cell. But if we change the scaffolding, the question that I ask is, how far can we go with changing that scaffolding? You can even change it with bones, because bones reform as well. And so if we change the physical structure of the cell itself, what are the grand implications of that? Well, if we can keep changing
by improving your function when it comes to running, walking, standing, throwing, right? If that is your goal, that makes complete sense. But I believe one of the reasons that you're dealing with so much adversity is because you're tackling a niche where it's been around far before you were here. Like, increasing your gait pattern, that's been around forever. But everything comes down to that level of specificity for each person's goal. And if, like, for example, if squatting is my goal, like I want to squat 1,000 pounds, and that minor rotation, that minor contortion does not cause me discomfort, I wouldn't necessarily say that you need to focus on that now. Like, people always change their mind down the road as their goals begin to change. Like, somebody like Dorian Yates, for example, switched from being the biggest mass monster to ever grace the stage to becoming a yogi, right? And people that maybe didn't make such an educated decision along their career, maybe like Ronnie Coleman, injuries do catch up to you. You start to feel the repercussions, and your quality of life down the road isn't the same, right? Yeah. So I do understand where you're coming from and basically the route that functional patterns is trying to take, because you're tackling something that has never really been approached with such passion, such drive, and such fire.
Well, this is another thing I want to get into, Jason. So when I talk about training in relation to your biology, I don't mean that that's all we're going to do. It's just these are just guidelines to tell people this is.
But again, the reason that we're on this, screen share, whatever, right now, started from a post, and the only reason I even took a dig at you in general, right? Yeah. Was because of that situation where essentially you guys were bastardizing specific movements. So I'd like to try and stay within that topic, because I feel like we're still kind of drifting off a little bit. So
I'm not. So could you elaborate a little bit more deeply what you mean? Because
I know that you're saying that functional patterns, you guys still do pull-ups, you guys still do squats, right? But
there's a way
It's
about
you guys
going
shelf things
about
that
it.
don't work, but you guys prioritize what you believe does and what your specific goal is. But do you not
Okay,
believe that
so
that's closed-minded in regards to everybody
no,
else's philosophy and goals
let
and
me clarify,
modalities?
because I need to clarify. I need to get deeper so you can kind of see where I'm coming from. So my
Yeah.
perspective is that, so let's say if one thing move, in order for one thing to move in space, something has to not move in space. Does that, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about is more physics. When I begin to talk about things in relation to standing, walking, running, and throwing, I'm simply just saying guidelines, priorities that we need to think about doing. If I have grandma's probably not, most women have problems with pull-ups. I feel that if you want to get better at doing a pull-up, you have to learn how to run better. And the reason I say you need to learn how to run better is because the lats and glutes directly tie in with one another through the function or oblique sling.
Yeah.
And so if I want the lats to work better, I want the glutes to work better for pulling motion. And the biceps are also going to be involved in running. All these things are going to be involved in, and ultimately, when I think about muscles and how they're supposed to work in space, they need to, in order for muscles to work correctly in space, they need to work within the confines of a kinetic chain. So if the muscles work better in a chain, they actually get stronger. When muscles work as independent systems, that's where you get injured. So the problem is there's still not a lot known about what I'm talking about. That's why I'm trying to kind of explain more of where I'm coming from. It's not that I'm closed off to doing squats or that I'm closed off to doing other things. For me, there's a general physical principle. There's a physics principle to this where the ratios between moving parts is what I'm getting at. And so much of it I can only put into words because it's like it's complicated, and I don't think I'm the best linguist. But at the end of the day, it's like there's physics principles to this, and the physics principles need to be respected. There's physics to doing a deadlift. There's physics to doing a back squat. I can make somebody, I guarantee you, I can make you deadlift way more weight teaching you the principles that I know. I can make you lift more weight just by understanding physics.
Yeah,
and so for me, so the whole idea just comes down to understanding physics as it relates to the human body, and then taking that principle and applying it to just saying like, hey, look, if you want to be like, I myself don't want to just be good at boxing or kickboxing. I'd like to be able to run really well. I'd like to be able to jump really high, dribble a basketball really well, go play some basketball, go play a game of tennis, racquetball, squash, whatever. I want to be able to do jujitsu. I'd like to be able to do everything in the movement arsenal. And the more that I have the roots, the scaffolding to do that, I feel that the better I can understand the root of all of it, the higher the likelihood is that I'm going to perform at the highest level doing it, and that at the same time I'm going to do it without getting hurt. And then never mind that when I do the movements correctly, the movements themselves are regenerative. That, let's say if I was to run with,
so, but what it sounds like is basically you're saying that with proper preparation, with proper like modifications to what you're doing, almost any modality style of what you choose, there is longevity there. Now, I'm like, because I'm reading some of the comments here too, and I believe that some of the people maybe took what I said out of context. So
I'm not even. Let me see what they're saying.
Yeah.
Let me see.
But
hey guys, like, sorry, one second, Jason. Hey guys, quick with the stereotyping. Don't be doing that stuff in here. I'm gonna kick you out if you do that.
Let him do it. It's all good.
That's not cool. That's not cool, guys. Shut up. Stop that. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah.
I wasn't seeing that. That's not cool.
Naughty,
Shut up.
I couldn't give a fuck what they say. So it's
I
between me and you right now, and everybody can have their own opinion. But
I do. But that's that they can't be doing that shit.
So,
sorry,
like,
bro.
for example, like when somebody like Socrates was basically saying, and I could be having like a little bit of a tweak in what he said, but you should be able to find the max capability of, or it's, what was it? Sorry. Every man deserves to see the max power and potential of what they're capable of, right? So, for example, like for me, I was gifted at a young age. I was able to squat 500 pounds when I was 16 before I even knew what proper technique was, right? That's something that you probably would never be able to do. But for example, I would probably never be able to do half the things that you're able to do just at face value from your genetic potential, right?
Yes. Yep.
So why would I not explore my genetic potential and then take the proper precautions, right? And make the modifications along the way for longevity? Because I feel like in the comments, it seems like a lot of people are saying, oh, do whatever is going to improve longevity. But you need to focus on your short and your long-term goal. So then you're able to have like the best quality of life. Because if you're just limiting yourself to only basically training for longevity, you're missing out on your maximum potential to explore something to its fullest.
Well, so the question comes down to like, and keep this in mind. I don't want it to come off as it being derogatory, but it's like if I want to explore my maximum potential and I say I want to smoke crack or do drugs, that's exploring a potential that's not necessarily going to be conducive towards good health. If I want, if I say I want to run,
but there's risks associated with anything you do.
Not with what I'm talking about. For me, like if let's say with wrestling, if I learn how to wrestle with perfect precision, which is what I had to cover, let's say with Kyle Dake, I had to say, okay, look, whenever you're in this position, this femur needs to rotate this way, the hips need to rotate this way, the ribs need to rotate this way in order for you to make it perfect. So what I'm getting at is that there's some activities that are
perfection is subjective as well, though.
Okay, so I would disagree with that. So, and I'll tell you why. And so I believe that most humans are more similar than they are different in terms of their mechanics. Some have a capacity to do things better than others. But with that said, from how I view things, I think that let me just think about how I would explain this. I believe that there's some activities that happen to be more conducive towards function than others, and that if they respect our blueprint, there's some activities that respect our blueprint as humans more than others. So let's say, for example, if I look at something like powerlifting, and it's a sagittal plane sport. It has you moving straight forward and back. And I know that powerlifters are going to say, well, that's not all we do. There's more that there is to the movement library.
Yeah.
But with that said, if your centerpiece is working in the sagittal plane, when human beings are contralateral reciprocators and we're meant to move in this fashion, where our spine is supposed to undulate, even our femurs to some degree undulate, where the femurs have to rotate in space, the tibias have to rotate. When our body has to do all these different motions to create motion propulsion, and then we reduce ourselves down to a place where yes, there could be some advantage to it, there could be some benefit to it. I guess I could see if somebody, it comes down to a purpose thing and what you want to do. And that's why on mine, I don't want to try and force, I'm not trying to push my values onto you either, Jason. So that's the whole thing. I'm just kind of saying where I'm coming from. I'm in my bubble, and I'm fully aware that I'm in my bubble, and I realize that my values don't apply to everybody. But my job is really just to sweeten up the pot to tell people, like, look, that.
Well, no, I do believe that you're putting some good points across, right? And that people should be a little. I do believe that you're making good points, and that people should be a little more open-minded to your own philosophies, right? But even still, reading the comments, it's like I'm hearing people say, like, oh, training for performance is not inducive with training for health or for longevity. Like, I don't believe that's kind of like the point that we're trying to get across here. It's just like,
this is the thing, though. I believe what they're getting at, Jason. I apologize, guys. Can you, if you guys can, I'll see if I don't know if I can cut off the comments. Try not to focus on this,
man, because I want to get everybody's like opinions here, so at least we can try and tackle it and just discuss it.
So what were you saying, bro? Sorry, I just got distracted. What were you speaking in reference to?
Training for like your short-term and long-term goals at the same time.
Okay. Training for performance. So look, it's like, what are we trying to perform for? Like that, this is like a conundrum I put onto everybody, on every athlete that I say is, I'm like, why are you doing what you do? Like, what's the purpose of it? I feel that humans are utilitarians. And like for me, I go back, I'm a determinist based upon how I live my life. I don't believe that free will exists. I believe that we are funneled in life. And so it just comes down to that. If you believe in free will, you're probably not going to agree with what I have to say, but I can break it down. I can get deeper into this. My perspective is that I'm a concoction of trillions of cells, right? And the mechanisms of biology, for our cells, is that one, we want to survive, and two, we want to duplicate. And duplication is a compromise to be able to survive for a longer period of time. So when I think about, let's say, what my purpose is as a human, my purpose is to survive, to become stronger on multiple fronts. And so I don't feel like I'm really being given the choice. I've made the decision a long time ago to say, hey, look, I don't really have a choice in the matter. My cells implore me to do things that are going to be good for my body. And if I don't do things that are good for my body, my cells are going to punish me and make me feel crummy. So for me personally, I
think living and thriving are two different things.
So as it relates to performance, the question comes down to,
what are we performing for? And is that performance relatable to our biology? So let me put it this way. Jiu-jitsu has all dimensions involved in it as it relates to movements. Tennis has all dimensions of movement involved in it. Baseball has all dimensions involved in it. If you do them both right and left-handed, if you kick a soccer ball left-footed and kick a soccer ball right-footed, it has all the dimensions involved in it. So when I think about something like powerlifting or Olympic lifting, my concern is that it doesn't have all the dimensional aspects of functionality for me. And so some sports can be made close to perfect, while other sports cannot be made close to perfect. And so when it comes to me, as it relates to performance, the question I ask is increasing the performance in that specific task going to be relatable towards me enhancing myself? And what's the trade-off that I'm going to get?
Enhancing yourself in what way?
What's that?
Enhancing yourself in what way?
I guess developing the concept of general strength. So let me put it this way: the way I see it is like this. If my muscles are primed fundamentally to make me move better in all ways, then I could go grab a barbell and deadlift it. Like way back in the day,
well, no, because it always comes down to level of specificity of the way that you're training, right? But again,
okay,
like my question is still, do you just how about this? Just answer this at face value. Do you think that people should squat and pull up? Squat, deadlift, pull up. Just at face value, no long exaggerated explanation, just at face value, do you believe that people should squat, deadlift, and pull up? Or do you believe that you should shelf it and not do those whatsoever?
No. So the thing is that there's context to that, but let me get into that. So squat, yes, not with a barbell on their neck. Deadlift, no, not with the barbell. Pick things up off the ground, yes, because picking something off the ground is different. Like actually, like grabbing a heavy medicine ball.
Yeah, like a strongman version of a deadlift and lifting, Atlas stones, natural stones, different implements like that.
Yes, just should you do it when you have vertebral body shearing laterally or posteriorly? No.
But that's the whole point in proper preparation, because everybody has some sort of imbalance at the end of the day.
Okay, so after imbalances are corrected, after you've learned how to fundamentally stand, walk, run, and throw, and you've mastered those things, and you have those under control so you can actually correct the asymmetries, yes, you should squat, lift stuff, not deadlift, I'll say lift things, and yeah, you should do pull-ups. Like those things are all there, but you can't get ahead of yourself. That's the premise, is not getting ahead of yourself. And to take it a step further, just to take it like one step further, it's how do we classify what getting ahead of ourselves really is? To one person, they'll be like, well, that squat looks good. To me, I'm like, well, I can look at that and then make a determination to tell you that based upon what I'm seeing, it's not just asymmetries. It's like, how many dysfunctions can you even see in your body? Like there's how many, like to what degree can we measure them? To what level of specificity can we even see a dysfunction? Are we going to talk about millimetric precision, microscopic precision? How far can we see a dysfunction? Because if we're not talking, because people think that a motion that big doesn't have a lot to do with correcting a dysfunction in the body. But for me, that's all I concern with myself with is motions that are that big. The summation of multiple motions in the body moving that much. So when I look at movement in the body as it relates to dysfunctions, I'm looking at things in a micro perspective comparatively to how most people would see it. So to me,
and that's something that I do appreciate. But now, so where do we find the common ground where we can take the understanding of human physiology and movement and the way that you're approaching it, and take other people's goals and wants and needs and create some sort of study or way of training? Because rather than limiting people and just saying you should never fucking back squat again, how do we make their back squat better is my question through functional patterns then.
Bro, do functional patterns and you'll see that you can back squat more. We've had people who've done powerlifting and FP together, bro, and they lift a lot more weight. We've had people that just do functional patterns. Like there was I don't browse around through studies. I don't know if you saw, but I debated Brett Contreras about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I saw it.
And so there was a study that showed, there was actually multiple studies that showed that athletes who could run faster actually had more leg strength in the traditional like back squats and deadlifts or whatever. The athletes who ran faster on rugby teams could actually lift more weight. So if simply speaking, if you're concerned about back squatting more, do functional patterns. Just do what we do. mix it in if you want to lift more. I don't want to sit here and tell you to not do what you do, bro. You got to do what you got to do in life. It's your life. You make your decision. All I'm going to say is, hey, you should try this stuff too to maybe balance some things out or whatever.
But see, the way that you're approaching like that explanation right there was so much more open-minded than the ways that, you know, your company's posts have been before.
Yes, and let me get into that, Jason. I was in the middle of a war and I needed to get some respect. And and the thing is, people didn't want to listen to what I had to say. And I swear, Jason, I cleared up the record so many times on live feeds. Nobody would tune into them, brother. That's just what it is. And you happen to be the guy that said, hey, man, I want to actually hash this out. And all props to you because you're actually sitting here talking about it. But on my end, bro, do what you got to do. But I'll just say do functional patterns. Mix in what you know of it. All I'm going to say is this, that if you invest really deeply into this, you might begin to question whether you want to do that after a certain period. But I think that's the case with just about anybody, man. I think as we get older, I'm not the same person.
Your goals change as your vanity changes too.
What I mean, bro. So that all I'm going to say is like, look, you just try it out. And if you guys find that it's useful, great. And if it's not useful for you, then throw it out. I just tend to find that people who do FP, even if they just mix it into what they do, they get benefit from it. But I feel that in time, as people do it more and more, they'll be like, you know what, dude, I'm actually like retaining my mass. I'm actually stronger than what I was before. I'm faster. And yeah, if I want to put a barbell on my neck and then freaking squat that thing up and with no problems, then they'll be like, I can do that too. But I think that it's like when people begin to go down this path long enough that the results are going to convince them to say, hey man, it's okay to change. It's okay to not identify by who I was before. And I don't see anything within you that says that you're opposed to changing. I mean, obviously you're, from the way you're talking to me, it's completely different. But the whole thing is I have a lot to clean up, Jason. I have a lot to clean up. I created quite a mess, and I created that mess on purpose. But in some way, and I realized that it had to be a mess before I could finally come to the place where I'm at. But I get respect in my field. People aren't criticizing me. The world is very different for me from what it was before, man. I used to get ridiculed really badly by a lot of people. I got picked on a lot, and my community got picked on a lot. And so people were defensive. That's just what it was.
It comes with controversy.
Yeah, bro. And so the whole thing is, it's like, for me, it's water under the bridge. All that stuff, I'm like, I'm grateful for it because it made me really, let me put it this way. If they didn't do that, I might not be as honest with myself today about what I'm doing for people. If people didn't second guess me, then I may not be so honest. So sometimes it's not so good for people to just be like, hey, you know what? Because what I'm saying is these are extraordinary claims, and extraordinary claims call for extraordinary evidence. And I want to put forth the extraordinary evidence to show people like, hey, man, just try it out. See how it works out for you. And I'm not going to criticize you if you want to go do your thing or whatever it may be. And now I will say this. If I have FP practitioners or if I have somebody representing my brand or representing myself, there's no middle grounds to doing that kind of stuff. I can't certify somebody. Like if I have somebody representing me, they have to represent me. You get what I mean? Like that's kind of what it is. If it's my company and and if people want to like abide by functional patterns and call themselves a functional patterns practitioner, then at some level they have to adopt the same value system that I do. And fortunately, I have hundreds of people that do that, maybe thousands at this point that do that. And I think because of that, that's probably why I'm a lot more chilled back, man. I think I don't feel like I have to change everybody. I feel like I'm just kind of trying to build a foundation to help people do things better. Because I think if we have a world with more balanced people in it and less strife in it and less fighting and less bickering and more self-ownership of our own problems a little bit more, if we're more inclined to want to look at the environment and just say, hey, we're kind of products of what's in it, but if we change the environment, we can do some things with it. I just feel that our world is kind of, in many regards, kind of going to crap, especially if you look at like, if you look at these mass shootings and things going around, if you look at this whole COVID thing, I think we could handle things a lot better as a species. And so on my end, really what my objective is at this point is to try and do whatever I can to help bring balance. And really, the only thing I can fall upon at this point, Jason, is just to essentially allow the results to speak for themselves, or not speak for themselves. I have to speak for saying why these results matter that we get, and then allow people to make the decisions that they want to. Allow them to bump their head against the wall if I think they're going to bump the head against the wall, so then they can make an adjustment on their own. People have to make the decision on their own, and I can't force them to make a choice. That's not fair for me. It's not up to me to make that decision for people, man. So that's not on me. And ultimately, I'm glad that we're having this conversation right now, because now everybody in my community is going to watch this and they're going to be like, yeah, look, we got to change our tone. We have to sit here and play the middle ground. We have to allow people
Well,
to do
that
their
was
thing.
something that kind of like, you know, I really did appreciate about our conversation the other night. Almost anything negative, I feel like at this point in time and like controversial is almost unnecessary because there's already so much negativity and people, you know, bashing each other and this fucking bullshit cancel culture that's going on right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree. It's can we have
being
a
able to be
conversation?
open-minded, I think, is like the big thing here. And I do definitely appreciate you hopping on with me today and like discussing it, hashing it out, you know, bouncing different perspectives off of it, and whether we agree or not, or whether the community agrees or not, I think everybody will get a little bit of something from this.
I think you have balls for even just like at least approaching this, because I think in our world we lack balls. I think people need to grab them a little bit and start like showing a little bit of vulnerability and just saying, hey man, maybe I don't got the full picture. And I realize I don't, bro. And I still realize I still have to learn a lot. I still have to, we all have a lot to learn, and we're all on a team at the end of the day. And that's the whole premise here, is that we're operating on a team. And so do I feel that, like, let me put it this way, Jason, do I think that I have the best method out there of conditioning humans? By far. And I won't say that, I will not bat an eye when I say that. I genuinely feel that FB is the best system out there by the widest margin. For me, as I'm looking at you right now on the phone, I feel that way. But it's up to me to actually display the results to prove that. If I'm going to expect people to buy in, I'm not going to. Let me put it this way: I'm still going to talk about things that relate to deadlifts, what I think are wrong with deadlifts. I'm still going to talk about what I don't think is right about back squats, because I think there's things that are wrong with it. What I also know is that people are utilitarians, and at some point they're going to say, well, let me just try this guy out. Let me just try out what he's got to say. And if they try it out and they feel better, they might say, you know what? I don't know why I was so attached to yoga. I don't know why I thought yoga was so great. I don't know why I didn't think that yoga was going to make me hyper flexible, when it actually does make me hyper flexible, and it's making my ligaments long and my muscles weak. It doesn't really make any sense for me to do yoga. So why am I going to do that? If it's not, and I'm going to have a video on that here pretty soon where I'll explain that stuff. But ultimately,
so,
I just think,
Naughty, for somebody like you with so much influence and so much reach, something I would ask, and I think that people would be able to.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
well,
on.
even then, man, like you have more than me. I have fucking 6,000 followers. Nobody gives a shit. So you can make a bit more of a difference, at least at this point in time, than I could. So when you're doing your studies, when you're, you know, finding these different ways to continue to increase human performance, please try and find a way to, you know, approach yoga, approach powerlifting, approach CrossFit, strongman, Olympic weightlifting, all of that in a way that may relate more to them, because I feel like they won't be as, you know, hard-headed and not want to fucking listen. And they'll actually be able to take some of your modalities and be able to start implementing it on their own.
Yes. So I think the route that I'm going to take from here moving forward, just so everybody's clear, so you're clear, I'm just going to say, look, that we're going to have a difference of opinions, but I'll say that,
because I can definitely see, you know, tons of benefits from FP training. Like like I said, my mentor Chad Benson, he was all about fascial lines, so I definitely see the benefit of it. But it was the way that, you know, it's been approached in the past, just I don't believe was something that people will actually reciprocate.
Yeah, I just think that the main difference is, bro, that it's one thing to talk about the anatomy, and it's another thing to actually take the anatomy and make it look completely different. To make somebody who just looks more balanced, but then they also look more balanced and muscular at the same time. Like that. So on mine, the reason that I'm a little bit more stern by what I say is because I feel like I'm not
it gets your point across better.
What's that?
Because you believe it gets your point across better, or it starts the controversy, it starts the topic of discussion?
I feel like most of the time people are concerned more about just like inclusion and saying, hey, I want to be inclusive to everybody for everything. And let me put it this way. If we're going to say that there needs to be inclusion in all things, in all aspects of society, then we might as well start. Do you believe that everybody should get a trophy if they win or lose playing a sport? So on my end, I got to operate I have to be congruent with that, because I don't feel that they should. I think that you should be rewarded when you do a good job. And if you don't do a good job, there is no reward. Because if we live in a society where good jobs aren't rewarded, bro, we live in a bad society. If people aren't punished, or I don't want to use the term punished, if bad work goes without a reward, then people will work harder to attain the reward. And I feel that our society should operate that way. So on my end, I I see that this all inclusivity component is problematic in our society. And I still see it in our industry where people say, hey man, we should be inclusive to everybody. But then at the same token, it'll be like, well, should we give everybody trophies? Should we give everybody handouts, whether they contribute in society or not? These are the questions that go down to it. And I feel that there's an incongruency there. So on my end, it's not really what it comes down to is I'll say, look, I'll be tolerant to other people's behaviors because I have to be. I can't be a tyrant. And even if I'm never going to be a tyrant. I want people to learn things for themselves. I'm just going to say, look, you can do deadlifts. You can do the yoga. You can do the back squats. You can do the hip thrusters. You can do all that stuff. But just be mindful of the things that I'm talking about because it might be relevant.
With that at all.
Yeah, man. So like do them. Like do what you got to do. I have no qualms with people doing what they got to do. The only thing that I'll say is that that people just they think about it. Just think about it. That's all I'm saying. Just think about it. Just be mindful of it. Be like, what is this doing to my hip every time I go into a warrior pose? What's this doing to my adductors when I do this? What's going on in my hip socket? Because these are the things that got me to understand what I have. Like the results that I get are otherworldly compared to what other people are doing in my field. People used to say that any physical therapist would do what I do. But as time has passed and people have seen physical therapists, they're like, oh, wait a minute. No, you aren't just some other physical therapist guy. It's like there's something new going on here. And so essentially, it's like it's a work in progress, man. And I want to be inclusive to everybody, but the problem is that inclusivity doesn't work in a society. If you include everybody in everything, then it's like you get underachieving and poor performance in life. And so in some regards, all I want to just do is just say, hey, look, you can do what you're going to do, but there's consequences. Some that could be positive and some that can be negative. There's repercussions for making bad decisions in life. And really my biggest goal in life is trying to just make people think more, to just think about what they're doing and not just assume that, hey man, that this decision that I'm making doesn't come with a consequence, because every decision that we make has a consequence. And although I don't feel that free will really exists, I feel that we're being funneled. I think at some level, if you're given the opportunity to think, then you need to take that opportunity, because we may have a form of contextual free will in modern times that we never had because of all the abundance that we've created within our civilization. So for me, as I see it, I think that thinking more is important. Just being aware of your body, listening to your body is really important. And that's 100%. Really the main gist of what I think people should do more, is just listen to their body and have dialogue with it on a regular basis and say, is this really helping me? And never mind that from the perspective of even like, let's say, not to beat a dead horse, but just because an exercise doesn't cause you pain doesn't mean that you can't just numb yourself from a specific movement. And I think oftentimes people think, well, this
exactly,
exercise is
and just numbing that pain is ignorant. But I think the whole point here is trying to find that balance between, increasing your performance, like finding your short-term goal, and that balance between that and your long-term goal with longevity.
Yes, for sure. And then finding the right formula that's going to ultimately work for you in your given state. But I do feel that as a species, we're going to funnel in the same direction. And my objective is to kind of funnel us in that same direction. Whereas I'm not a poly exercisist, I'm a mono exercisist. I believe that there's one way of doing things, and I know people will say, no, I disagree with that. And I'll be like, I believe there's one, that movement as a principle, that biomechanics as a principle it operates in one way, and that we need to respect that one way, because mechanical propulsion works in one way. And if we don't respect mechanical propulsion, then we pay the price. If we don't understand the tensional components or the hydraulic compression components of movement, we're going to pay the price for that. And I just think that hopefully I can help along the path towards helping us evolve and get to a better place, man. But yeah, Jason, this was actually a really, really good conversation. It actually exceeded my perspectives. We pushed each other a little bit, and I thought it was great, man. And hopefully more people check you out as well and get to see your journey as you evolve, because like I said, we're all changing together, man. And I think at the end of the day, we're all going to funnel towards a similar path. I think that's where we're moving to as a species, that we're moving towards coming to having a general wisdom that's going to bring us to realize that we're more similar than we are different, if that makes sense.
Well, I hope that anybody that sees this conversation too has a bit of a different perspective of you after this as well, because you're definitely a lot more open-minded than I thought. So I appreciate it. And I think you have the right intentions.
I really, really thank you for coming on and help, like actually being here to help clear out the air. I think this is going to be really fruitful for, at least for my community, and for anybody who comes around FP and whatnot, and never mind that, that people in my community, if they engage with somebody from your community who might be more critical, where it's like, hey, look, they have they have their conditioning, they have their way of looking at the world. Let's try and be more patient with each other and just engage in dialogue. Simply just ask questions and try and squash the beef, not cancel each other out, and just have a conversation. There's nothing wrong with just having a conversation.
Oh, you cut out there.
Yeah, so, no, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation at the end of the day. That's my biggest thing, that we can converse. And I just had to become a monster for a while, Jason. That's just what I had to be, bro. I had to try.
It is what it is. It worked, apparently.
I'm not proud of it. I'm not. It's not one of those things that I look back on and say, hey, look, I was a freaking freakazoid. It's not that I disagree with things that I said in the past. I agree with it. I could have gone about it differently, but when you're in a dogfight and you're trying, and the only way you know how to do what you do is by doing things the way that you know how to do them, you're bound to bump your head against the wall. And I bumped my head against the wall with many things. And never mind that, it was a phase in my life. So, and sometimes you just realize you got to do things that you don't want to do to attain the results that you want to get. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on, and maybe we'll do this again in the future, maybe in a few months or something like that. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Thank you again for the talking, Naughty. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah, bro. Keep getting after it, brother. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, bye.